I'm incredibly excited today to announce the release of Spider Impact 5.8. There are three new big types of functionality in the software. First is the AI assistant. Second is the no-code apps functionality. And third are platform-wide enhancements that make your life easier and add new functionality throughout the entire software. So the AI assistant is the first of an entire suite of new artificial intelligence functionality that we're adding to the software, and it allows you to chat with your data. Dashboards are fantastic for showing and conveying information to stakeholders when you know the information you want to share ahead of time. But sometimes those stakeholders have questions about the data that you haven't thought of and you didn't anticipate answering. It allows them to chat natural language style with their data to get answers and visualizations, and we'll show you all about that. Second is no-code functionality. So you're able to build apps directly within Spider Impact that can be accessed via their own URL. These are curated experiences, and they build on the success that we've had with forums over the past year. And finally, there's platform-wide enhancements. These are sweeping changes to make the software easier to use, new types of data visualizations, new types of import and export functionality, things that affect the entire application that we've added in version 5.8. So let's talk about Impact Assistant. In the lower right-hand corner of the software right there, there's a new icon. It's called Impact Assistant. When you click on it, you can chat with your data. Here we're asking, how much did we make last year? And Impact Assistant goes off and checks with your data sets. It works with data sets first, and it says, okay, you made $7.8 million last year. And this is not the type of information where we're sending all your data over the wire to the AI. What's actually happening is we are just sending the metadata to the AI. We're not saying, here's all of the sales, all of the 15 million sales we've made over the years. We're just saying, here's all the data sets they have permission to see. Here's all the fields in those data sets, and here's some metadata. For example, maybe there were 56,000 unique customers or whatever, right? Like some big picture information about your data, but we're not actually sending your data over the wire. And the AI comes back and says, okay, we want you to see, and you can click show data source to see our work behind the scenes. Based on you saying, how much did we make last year? The AI says, I suspect you're looking in the device sales data set and you're looking for the sum of the sales price where the sales date is in 2024. Great, that's exactly what I asked for. And so the AI is not going to hallucinate because it doesn't have access to your data. Instead, it turns whatever you've typed in into an actual Spider Impact data widget and puts your data right up on the screen. What's also great is that we keep a conversational history back and forth with your AI, so you can ask follow-up questions. I can say, break that down by salesperson. It's going to go out and look at all your different data and come back with a chart, and it's going to be the same chart every single time. Here are sales by employee for 2024. And notice I didn't have to say, I want to see the total sales in 2024 broken down by salesperson. I just say break that down by salesperson, and the AI knows based on the previous conversation we've had what I'm talking about. Or we could say something like, as a pie chart comparing retail versus corporate sales, and it knows that retail and corporate are in the sales department for the salesperson, and it's going to give me a nice looking pie chart. Now, this is great when you're getting really quick answers to questions, but if you decide that you want to save this later, no problem. You just click a button and you're able to choose an organization if you have the right permissions to save this data off. It's also super important to note that you do not get, this follows the permissions model of Spider Impact. So you're only able to get information from Impact Assistant that you already have permission to see other places in the software. So Impact Assistant is great for getting data that you want to ask questions really quickly, but there's also other types of information you can get from Impact Assistant. Here I'm saying recommend things that I can learn from my data. And Impact Assistant is going to look at all the data that I have permission to see in my data sets, and it's going to come back and suggest some stuff. And it says, okay, well, you've got these 6 different data sets that you can access, and here's some example ways to interact with this data. Well, that monthly device sales over time looks great. I want to see monthly device sales over the past year. So I just click it and it's going to show me monthly device sales over the past year broken down by month, which is incredibly helpful. Another thing that's built into Impact Assistant is support. All of our support documentation that's online at support.spiderstrategies.com is also available to Impact Assistant. So when I say, how do I create a bar chart? Impact Assistant is going to look at all of our support documentation and give you very simple steps to creating that bar chart. And it's also going to link to relevant support articles to help you do that as well. And so if I look here, oh look, that building charts article is great. I click that, it takes me to support.spiderstrategies.com and shows you the full support article that it was able to get that summary information for. Apps is another big feature within Spider Impact. It is an entirely new section up there under collection. So the concept here, a lot of us are well aware of briefings within Spider Impact. They're presentations. So it's a lot like PowerPoint, right? Where you say, I want to show my strategy map, or I want to show this data visualization, or I want to show my downward trending KPIs report, right? You curate very specific screens within your software and you click through and you take people through you tell a story, you take people through a linear path just like a PowerPoint presentation. But the difference is, unlike PowerPoint, your data is live, so you can click on something, drill down to the data behind the scenes, answer whatever questions you have, and then you can click a link and resume your presentation right where it left off. Apps is a lot like that, except for it's non-linear. Instead of having several screens that you click through in an ordered fashion, it assembles those screens together as tabs up on top. It's sections within your mini curated application, and you build custom applications. You know, this first section, show them a dashboard, then show a form for collecting information, then show them a reporting area. And I'll get into that, but that is essentially what apps is. Before I actually launch into the apps functionality though, I want to cover a concrete use case, because this is the kind of thing that is best explained with an example. The US Army has been using the apps functionality as a pilot program for several months, and they were already able to recreate and replace an existing legacy system at a cost savings of over $1.2 million a year. This has been live in production for a couple months now, and we're having absolutely incredible success. So this is an example application. This is a training server. You'll be able to see a lot of John Doe information in here, right? But this is a quick overview of the ICRS system. It's for tracking sexual assault cases in the US Army. This is the system of record. And there's a lot of different various tabs with, you know, user access requests or user listings. But the harassment case listing page is the main thing where everything is. And so it'll display 10 cases at a time. If I want to go through case 60 through 69, I click on, you know, the page 6, and I can select Jane Doe here, and it's just information about a case. There's all kinds of, you know, date it happened, a description of the incident, whatever, right? A lot of information about the particular case. And so our mission was to recreate this in Spider Impact. And in order to do that, we needed the apps functionality. We also needed a lot of enhancements made to forms, which we're going to be talking about at the end, because these are getting a little technical, and I want to show you up front just the big picture new things that you can do. So here is the app in ICRS. Again, this is all AI generated dummy data. No information is real here. So I am clicking to the Edit tab, and this lists the 5 different sections of ICRS. There's the home, there's access requests, all users, cases, and reporting, right? And before I get there, notice here that the app has a URL, because these apps are accessed outside of Spider Impact. Yes, they use all the Spider Impact permissions and they use all the Spider Impact data, but they are a curated set of pages that lives outside at their own URL, and you get to pick that URL right here on this configuration screen. All right, so let's click on the Home tab. Well, the Home section, if you look here over that way, it says Dashboards, Single Dashboard. And so we're just showing a single dashboard when they click on Home. And when we click on Cases, we are showing a form, a form that lists all the cases, and I click on one of the cases and it shows the case detail. And when you go to reporting, instead of showing a single thing, if you notice it says, yes, I want to show the dashboard section, but I want to show every single dashboard for an organization. So you can show a single thing underneath each app section, or you can show every single item for a particular organization. And this is what it looks like in action. We're going to open the app. This opens in a brand new tab. Again, someone can bookmark this and visit it. This is what they see when they go to their new application, their ICRS application. As on the upper left-hand corner, we've got home, access requests, all users, cases, reporting. And this is just a dashboard. And if you want to change the announcement message or whatever, you just go into the dashboard section and change whatever announcement you want on there. But again, just like everywhere else, most of the action happens in the cases section. So we're going to click cases. And because this is built on Spider Impact, you have data visualization as a first-class citizen. We see a pie chart breaking down formal, informal. We see a shape widget showing total reports, right? You can have whatever kind of information on a dashboard here because this is just a form. And I can click New Case to create a new case, or I can quickly search through my 14,000 cases rather than 10 at a time. So I'm going to type in Janet, and here's all the things instantly coming up that match Janet. And I'm going to click, oh yeah, right, I wanted the Janet Chavez case. Again, all AI generated data. And this is the exact same case management system. If you are familiar with our forms, you'll see a whole bunch of new forms functionality here. Again, I'm getting to that. I'm saving that to the very end because we've got a lot of other exciting functionality to talk about before we dig into the technical mechanics of how we build these forms. But one thing that might jump out at you is this DA form 7746, you now have the ability to upload documents directly in forms. And here you can upload a particular case form about this particular case, and it would be associated with that data set record. All the form is exactly the same, but what's brand new for ICRS is that these folks now have a reporting tab. There was zero data visualization in the old system. It was strictly for collecting of data, but now you can add utility for the people who are entering your data. And so yes, they are entering new cases, updating case information as it proceeds through the legal system, but now they have a whole reporting system, and so you can interact with your data live just like you can anywhere inside of Spider Impact. And all of the permissions and functionality from within Spider Impact apply to these custom apps. So you're able to write all these curated custom data collection or data visualization apps, and then everything is centrally managed and stored and audited in Spider Impact. Even better, you have the ability to include Impact Assistant in every single app. So here we're saying how many incidents were at Fort Riley in 2024 or 2023, right? It's going to go off and think just like if you were inside of Spider Impact, but it's doing a query inside of your curated app because again, it just says 14 and it's the number of records and harassment incidents, blah, blah, blah. So it's able to take my natural language query and turn it into an actual data set query, which is fantastic. So just like in Spider Impact, you don't always know the types of questions people are going to need to know answers to ahead of time. That's what Impact Assistant is for. It's built into apps as well. So those are the two major tentpole features that are just, if I was going to be standing in an elevator with someone and said, what are the major things coming in the software? Well, you've got this ability to build these apps. You've got this Impact Assistant where you can chat with your data set data. You're about to see, however, that is absolutely not even close to everything in the software release. There's a whole bunch more things, including forms stuff at the end. So let's dig right into it. This is a brand new type of data visualization. It's a bullseye chart. And it allows you to take a whole bunch of disparate data that doesn't necessarily all fit together and put it on a big bullseye so you can see, better performance is closer to the center. It's a lot like linear gauges that we have, but they're linear gauges wrapped around, on a polar axis around a center. So this is a natural fit for KPIs. In this particular example, I'm showing average monthly use. This is for a make-believe software company. Infrequent use, frequent use, customer churn, active trials, new trials. These are all related KPIs, but because KPIs are already scored on a 0 to 10 score, it is perfect for this because you already have that normalized scale between 0 and 10, and you can compare apples and oranges. So if I see I have customer churn at 3, that's red, that's doing very poorly. but average monthly use is 9.8. That's doing great. You can kind of compare all of your different metrics in one single chart, which is super, super helpful. You can set, there's a bunch of different configurations options on this new type of chart. So for example, in this, by default, I've got a red, yellow, and green, but you can choose any color you want for these backgrounds. You can do as many slices or as few slices as you want. Here we've got threshold line values set to 0, 3.33, 6.66, and 10, just like, standard scoring. But you can actually change those thresholds and set them however you want. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, but stick with me because you'll see how powerful this is. You're able, oh, one more thing, sorry. You can stick a line here. So if you've got a really important threshold line, here I've set it up as a color blue, you can actually draw lines between these different segments. Lots of different visualization options for you. Okay, now this is where it gets tricky. There's a mode called independent thresholds. Normally, all the thresholds are the same. You've got, 0, 333, 666, and 10, right? So they're all like compared. The scale on the entire bullseye chart is the same throughout the entire thing. That does not have to be the case, and that's incredibly powerful with data sets that do not have built-in thresholds. So what you can do is you now have a point data source and a threshold data source for every slice of the bullseye pie. And so you have, you can set the point and the threshold data source, and this is often what you'll want to do. On the left, we see this is the threshold data source. The sales date is in the current period, and it's the average sale price in the current period. So the threshold, what we're measuring ourselves against is what is the average sale for January or February, whatever we're visualizing on this chart or dashboard. And then the point data source is the exact same thing with one extra filter added. We are saying where the sales employee is Russell Corrick. And so we are comparing Russell's sales against Russell's average sale against all of the salespeople average sale. And then when you're doing that, the threshold line percentages, because each of these slices is a different scale altogether, instead you say, all right, each slice compares to the goal. So if I am matching the average or better, 100 or better, if I'm 100% of the average or better, I'm green. If I'm between 75% and 100 of the average, I'm yellow. And if I'm below 75% of the average, I'm red. And again, all this is customizable, but this is, the ideal use case. So you end up with something like this on the left, where you've got all of your salespeople compared to the average. And so in August of 2025, Micheline was way below the average. Odell was way below the average. All that makes sense if this is on the same scale. But on the right-hand side, I've added a new filter where I am comparing each person against their department's average sale. And all of a sudden the numbers shift because corporate sales are massive. There's only a couple of corporate sales every month. And then retail sales, you'll sell 100 times more product than the corporate side of things, but your sale value is very small. So if you notice over here on this right-hand side, Kim has 15,000 of sales, and she's slightly below her department average, where Micheline has 632 in average sales, and she is slightly below her average, but they're both in this competing in about the same. And so I know it's a little bit hard to explain, but these bullseye charts allow you to take apples and oranges comparisons, and you're able to compare averages. So for example, you might have workplace injuries at different departments. So this bullseye might represent my Michigan plant. And it compares workplace injuries in Michigan versus my workplace injuries throughout my entire company. And this slice might be overtime hours, and it compares my Michigan plant's overtime hours versus my entire company's overtime hours. And again, this is all from data sets, and so you can slice and dice and see how the different numbers affect a particular region or a particular salesperson or whatever. It allows you to add types of scoring to data sets. And you can add these to dashboards as well. So for example, here's a bullseye chart we were just doing where we were looking at, this is each salesperson's average sale that month versus all of their sales that month. So we're not comparing them against their department anymore. We're comparing them against their own performance. And you can see Micheline here is having a little bit better month than average for her. Kim is having an average month, maybe a little worse than average for her. And when you apply filters, it automatically updates the filters throughout the whole thing. So you can say, well, Kim's sales in North America were a little bit worse than her average sale in North America. And so these filters, you can set up all kinds of complicated filters and slice and dice this data however you want. But and all this documentation is online. But the big picture story with these bullseye charts is that you're able to take data set data and set a unique scale for every slice, and you're able to take KPI data that's already scored and just compare KPIs for a particular region or a particular salesperson. All right, I promise that is as complicated as it gets. Everything else is going to be really simple compared to that. On these tree map charts, you have the ability to show data labels directly on the chart in addition to the names that we've already been able to do. You can turn off axes and grid lines, turn them on and off for both x-axis and y-axis. Now in this particular example, we're just showing x-axis labels and grid lines. The y-axis is completely turned off. When you're doing line charts representing time data, we no longer cram in all of the different labels as deeply as tight as you can, because it doesn't really, you can fill in the gaps with your brain of what fits in there, and it makes it a lot more clean and easy to see. Also, we don't have as many grid lines showing horizontally compared to what we used to. And all of this is configurable in administration. You can turn chart x-axis grid lines on and off by default. They now default to off, and it makes a little bit cleaner data presentation. But if you want to keep them on your scorecard section, you can turn them on in administration. You can now break down by geographic region automatically on bar charts. This is actually kind of an interesting one. If you have data flowing in and updating slowly on a chart, for example, here you might have customer cancellations, and the data might be a sum metric, but you've got it hooked up to a data set that's updating its data every day. Well, if I'm currently in the month of September and I'm in early part of September, I might only have 2 customer cancellations coming in, and so my cancellations, my month isn't complete yet, my cancellations might be very low. That's very problematic because when you start doing data projections into the future, it's going to be projecting off of that 2 point. So when there are certain situations where that's not going to make sense, for example, the current period isn't completed and your aggregation type is sum, not average, things like that, this ignore current period checkbox will be defaulted to on. So vast majority of the time, this just automatically handles itself in the software, and it's going to ignore the current period that isn't completed yet. So right now, it's going to skip that entire 2 until the month is over and we have all of our data collected, and it'll do the data projection based on this 88 number instead of 2. The labels on bar charts are much easier to read now. They're much larger. They're automatically larger for a lot of situations, but you can always tweak that number. You can now go in to edit these bar labels, and you can change the font size manually to make this bar chart label exactly the right size that you want. For our charts, you can now have calculated KPI data on your chart. So in the past, for example, if I wanted to show a chart of year-to-date information, I would have to create a second KPI, reference my initial regular KPI in an equation, and put it in a to-date function. Well, no longer. I can just go in and write it a to-date function and reference a different KPI, and I can visualize data in an equation on a chart without actually creating additional KPIs. On the dashboard side of things, we have all kinds of great new enhancements. This is my particular favorite. When you start bringing 2 widgets near each other, instead of connecting automatically, which you can make them if you drag a little further, right before it starts connecting, when they're about 16 pixels apart, they snap the perfect spacing. And so no longer are we going to have dashboards where you have to kind of eyeball the spacing between widgets. These things automatically snap to a good, reasonable spacing between widgets themselves. On shape widgets on dashboards, you've always been able to change whatever you drill down. So in this particular example, I've got a solar projects dashboard, and when I click on it, I want to say, I want to drill to the solar projects report. Well, now we automatically apply filters if your chart is the same data set as the report or dashboard that you're drilling down to. In this particular example, I've got a filter applied where the contractor is Abundant Solar Power Incorporated. There's only 10 solar projects for that particular contractor. And if I click on that number 10, which is a live number that updates on my dashboard, it's going to drill me to a solar projects report, but it's only going to show me the 10 reports or the 10 projects represented by that number 10. So for example, if I change that contractor to a different contractor, it'll say 15 solar projects. I click on that, it's going to show me a different 15 solar projects report. So it allows you to drill down to either reports or dashboards to show you information behind those live numbers. And I think this is going to add a lot of utility to dashboards and drill down functionality. You can now change the font on dashboards. It applies to the entire dashboard, and you've got a wide variety of fonts you can apply to. So you can make your dashboards follow a particular corporate branding if you have, a corporate branding that you want to follow. In this particular example, it's Georgia, where it's a serif font. It looks a little bit more formal. We've rearranged all of the objects on the shape formatting menu, and we put them underneath its broad category. So for example, here, shape outline and shape text are turned off, and so there's nothing on that particular shape, so all its configuration options are hidden. Shape fill is turned on, and so the fill type and the fill color are enabled underneath, and it makes it a lot easier to turn on and off entire blocks of settings for these shapes. In this example, shape text is turned on, everything else is turned off, so I only see the configuration options for shape text. And finally, all of the configuration options for objects outside of the shape, this financial perspective description or whatever, that is all configured in a new menu called Outside Display and Formatting that only shows up for scorecard items and initiative items. For shapes, we have gradients, and if you notice here, the gradients used to rotate along with the shape. But that kind of destroys the metaphor or the appearance of a 3D appearance. So now the gradients stay in one place as these shapes rotate. They always go from light to dark. And so wherever you rotate these shapes on your dashboards, they're all going to have a nice 3D looking appearance. There's a lot of functionality like this in 5.8 that just, it's a good quality of life improvement. It just makes your dashboards look better without any additional effort. On data sets, we have the ability to change the record ID column. This is fantastic if you're really digging into data sets and making a lot of big edits. You now have missing value treatment on calculated fields as well. So if you have a complicated equation where it's field A plus field B divided by field C, well, what happens if field C is blank? Well, treat missing values as 0, treat them as blank. They'll make the entire equation blank. This is functionality we've always had for KPIs. Now we have them for data set fields. With importing and exporting, this is another large area of improvement within our software. So we've prided ourselves on dashboards that automatically adjust and shrink and grow in length and width because you never really know what type of device is going to be used to view your dashboard. So if I want a dashboard that's a little bit taller than wide, I think people are going to use it on a mobile phone or whatever. I can arrange my widgets in that particular way, and it'll look fine when I look at it on a desktop, and it'll stretch it to fill its screen on a mobile device, and it looks good. But there are situations where you want to build a dashboard for a very specific aspect ratio. For example, maybe you're planning on exporting the whole thing to PowerPoint, and that's a very common way of viewing this. Or maybe you're briefing leaders, and you're always going to be on a widescreen presentation in the boardroom. Well, for those situations, you can change the aspect ratio from a default of auto, and you can lock it into widescreen or standard. And here we've locked it into widescreen. If you notice, the dashboard grows quite a bit wider in this situation because based on that height, I'm going to need a certain width. And so it's added extra space on. And then now I can take my dashboard and it's locked into that particular aspect ratio. It still grows and shrinks as a whole, but the width to height ratio is locked in now. And so now I can arrange things perfectly so they look great on a widescreen appearance. And when I export this thing to PowerPoint, I know exactly what it's going to look like. There's going to be no extra room around the edges, and it looks fantastic. There's another setting on dashboards where you could remove the border around the outside. So most of the time, dashboards will look great. They were designed so that they were designed to lay out multiple widgets next to each other, and you put a little bit of space between the widgets, and the software naturally puts space around the edges of the entire dashboard so that it looks great like this. That looks good until you use a predefined image for your background on your dashboard. In that situation, you do not want a border around your dashboard because there's only a single object. You don't have to separate it from anything, and now you've got this gray border around your dashboard. It looked great when you have a bunch of widgets, but it doesn't look great when you have a big background image. So there's a new setting you can turn off called edge padding. It turns off that edge padding on your dashboard, and it turns it off for export. So now you can export dashboards with a background image, and it's going to look great in a PowerPoint export. It's going to look great on your screen. It does not add that border when you don't want it. There's a bunch of export options that have changed. You can now export, you can choose between widescreen or standard. Our PowerPoint exports used to be standard only. Widescreen is incredibly common. It's the new default. Similarly, you can turn off slide titles and calendar periods. So this little bar on the top could show up on your PowerPoint exports, or it doesn't have to. It's a configuration, or it's a export option whenever you're exporting your data. When you export to Microsoft Excel, we no longer put a title, 2 rows. We used to have a title and then a blank row. That is now completely missing or completely removed, so that all of the headers in your Microsoft Excel exports are your data column headers. And this is going to be a lot easier to manipulate the information. You never have to remove that anymore. When you are importing data from Google Sheets or any Google Docs, before you only could import data that you yourself were an owner of. Now you can import data that you are either the owner of or someone has shared with you. So if you have permission to see a document in Google, you have permission to import it into Spider Impact. Now there are a bunch of administrative fixes, many around performance. The software is dramatically more fast and powerful. Score calculation is quite a bit faster. A lot of the form manipulation is quite a bit faster. But for the purposes of this presentation, I just want to focus on one thing. There are a couple of new currencies. There's the Saudi Rial. It's a new currency for Saudi Arabia that is now in the software. And then there's a unit of account. This is really popular where developing countries have a currency that fluctuates quite a bit. So instead of tracking your assets in that particular native currency, you will create this kind of a placeholder unit of account currency. It's the thing where very few people need it, but if you need it, you really need it. And our software now supports unit of account currency. Okay, all of the other data visualization stuff, I've covered everything. Let's dig into forms. I'm not going to, this is not going to be a training session. I'm just going to talk big picture. Here's everything forms can do, because in order to build apps, in order for you to create a brand new system of record for tracking new types of data, or for you to create advanced forms for collecting data, we had to add a bunch of new functionality into forms. And you're now able to use forms and apps together to completely replace entire existing systems of record in the software. And I'm going to launch into the new functionality to close out this presentation. So there's a bunch of new and improved dashboard widgets. We now have advanced layout where you can drag and drop form widgets so that they're next to each other and automatically create multi-column layout. When you view those forms on a mobile device, it's responsive design, so it stacks them on top of each other, automatically rearranging your forms for beautiful, perfect use on any style or size of device. We have a new panel widget that allows you to organize forms. Here's 2 panel widgets next to each other. Here are 2 columns within a panel widget. Panel widgets are great for organizing and grouping data, but they also allow you to directly interact with it through code, or through the no-code interface. You can say, change this. Maybe this is the user configuration advanced settings, and you could have a button to turn it on and off to hide an entire panel. So you don't have to say, hide these 15 fields one at a time. Instead, you would turn the entire panel on and off, showing and hiding a group of data. The button widget has been changed to the buttons widget. So you can have multiple buttons in a row. You can have some aligned left, some aligned right. You can change the color of the buttons, and you can even turn on a checkbox to use the button bar as a sticky button bar on the bottom. So as you scroll your content up and down, it scrolls, but that button bar is locked to the bottom of your form, so you always have access to whatever buttons you need. There is sorting on the record list widget, so you can sort by one or more columns by default. And when you directly interact with those columns, you can click it to sort ascending first, descending second, and a third click resorts it back to its default. And so you can, the sorting is going to be super helpful for people who use record list widgets. This is the home for a lot of advanced forms where it just lists all of your record on the home screen, and you click on a particular record to do various things with it. Files and forms, we talked about this at the very beginning. There's a new data type in data sets, and its type is file. And this is what it looks like when you upload a file directly in the dataset section. This is what it looks like when you have a upload form directly within a form. This information, these files can also be displayed as a column in the record list widget. And when you write a report, if you have a file there, you can click on the link within your report to download the file. There are two things left, and we're getting more and more technical. But again, if you use forms and you want to replace existing systems of record, you will see how powerful this functionality is without being incredibly difficult to use. We now have behind the scenes data manipulation to do stuff that isn't directly on your screen. So all of this is based on the concept of form variables. When I'm editing a form, I can set these variables, and the most common type of form variable is just a standard field. It's just like a data set field, where we're going to call this variable name commission percentage, and its data type is numeric, it's a percentage, and its default value is 35. So if I'm building a form like this, maybe it's a bonus calculator or whatever, the default commission percentage is 35, then my various screens will just reference the commission percentage. But then maybe on form load, it looks up and it says, oh, what user is this? What type of person are they? Oh, they're a manager? Okay, well, they only get 12% commissions because they manage so many different people. And so I'm going to change the default commission. I'm going to change the commission percentage from its default to the value of 12. And so based on whoever logs in, all of the calculations automatically update behind the scenes. So form variables are fantastic for storing pieces of information temporarily that you don't actually intend on saving to a data set. It just, here's a variable, save it over here, we'll reference it later. Another type of form variable is a data set record. And if you choose data set record, you choose a data set. So for example, again, there is a million different use cases for this kind of stuff. But let's say I am tracking I have a customer form where I fill out detailed information about a particular customer. Well, when I save that customer record, I can save the actual data that I just saved, but then I can also take all that data and I can save it in a temporary last customer entered form variable. And it just remembers information about the last customer I entered. So when I go to enter that customer again, maybe I grab the previous address because it's very common to share customer, you enter 5 different customers in a row all having the same address. Or maybe I want to enter the same sales rep again because that's common, or whatever, right? It's very easy to remember information about a previous record or load that, that data set record however you want and then reference that in other places. Again, it's just a temporary holding spot to store your variables as you're filling out your form. These form variables are accessible anywhere your normal field variables are. These are current record values that you've always been able to add. Well, just at the very bottom, it lists your form variables so you can reference them anywhere else. You can also load values from a data set now. This is incredibly popular or powerful. So you're able to say, all right, I've got a customer ID variable over there. Go to the customer's data set, load a customer matching 1, 2, 3, and populate the form with its values. Or whatever. There's a million different ways you can do it, but you can now load data set values behind the scenes in forms. You can replace the current record, or you can load data set values into a data set variable. You can save a record behind the scenes. So you can load values, you can save values. These are all things that you can that can happen without the user ever seeing what's happening. So you can do all kinds of powerful interactions behind the scenes. You can now set equations for if statements. So for example, I can build a complicated if statement that references either the current record or a form variable or a data set value. So in this particular situation, I am looking at a couple of different fields. If the employee name is blank and the manager name is blank, then do some sort of actions, right? And so what you're able to do is you're able to create complicated form logic that, right in the past you would say, well, this field's required or this field is optional. But now you're able to say, well, if this value is filled in and this value is filled in, then this value is optional. You're able to do complicated logic in your form based on multiple field values. You can also, like I said, reference data set values, and this is incredibly powerful. Let's say we have a data set with exchange rate conversions. I can make my form, when you first load the form, it can look up the conversion rate of the US dollar versus the Australian dollar. And if the US dollar is worth more than the Australian dollar, the form does some sort of behavior. If the US dollar is worth less than the Australian dollar, it does a different set of behaviors, right? So, and again, that is one specific, very small example, but any value in your data set you can retrieve and make it affect the form value, and that stuff can be constantly changing. You can use if statements to set a form value. So the first one was, I'm using an if statement to conditionally break on logic, do different logic based on form values. Well, now this is, I can set a value to be the result of an equation, which allows you to do, again, all kinds of really complicated stuff. The very last thing I want to talk about is linked records in dialogues. So on forms, you often have linked records. So for example, here's my customer management form. I am looking at these customer records, and I can see here I have made 4 different sales at various points in time to this particular customer. These are all linked records. There's a sales data set that links over to the customer's data set. So there are 4 sales records for this particular customer record. Well, now I can click on one of these individual sales, and I can see the sales details in a little dialog to pop up. And that's incredibly helpful because, if I'm a repair shop for an auto repair, I can see a customer detail, or I can see, information about the last sale or whatever. You can design these forms to have pop-up or dialogues to show details on information that you click. In order to do this, there is a new dialog object inside of a form. So a form has a natural data set. This is a customer form. This is a return form. And then a dialog is almost like a form within a form. You choose a data set for that dialog, and then you build up that page just like you would any other form page, except for the fields that you get to choose from are the fields from the dialog that from the data set you choose from the dialog. And then when you're actually using those dialogs, here's how you use it. You configure the linked record on the form, and there are now 6 new values underneath where you could choose what information shows. So one is the value and label field. What field do you want to use to name this? That's from there before. And then for 2, do you want to be able to create new records in a dialog? If so, pick the dialog you want to create new records. And if you pick a dialog, when you click that new button, it'll launch the dialog to create new records. And if you choose a dialog for edit link records in a dialog, if you leave that blank by default, you can't edit the records. But if you choose a dialog to use, I can click on a value and I can edit the field in a little pop-up. Or allow linking to existing records. By default, it's off, but maybe you want to be able to choose existing sales so I can have it a single sale assigned to multiple customers, right? Allow removing links. When that's off, you cannot delete the links. When it's on, you get those little delete links in the upper right-hand corner. And then delete linked records when last link is removed. The concept here is you can leave that once you start deleting stuff, you can leave that orphan sale out there if I delete the customer that the sale applies to. Or if I delete a customer, do I want to delete all the sales associated with that customer as well? This dialog is great for directly, automatically linking into the software, but you can actually show dialogues anytime you want. There's an action called show a dialog. And so I can create an error message dialog that displays whatever error message I want. and I can build up an error message if this particular field is required. I can set a form variable behind the scenes that says the error message is blah, 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 blah. And then when I show my dialog, it pulls out that form variable and fills it into the dialog. And so here I say, I'm going to use the dialog, the error message dialog that I built, and its title should be "There was a problem with your input," and I'm just going to have a close only button. It just pops up and tells the user some piece of information, and they close it, and I move on with my way. But there's also an option on the bottom called cancel and continue. When you choose that, there's all kinds of more options. What do you want to call that continue? On the left hand, it's cancel, it doesn't do anything. On the right hand, you hit that button, it does something. What does that button do? Well, here I want to call it continue. I want to make it standard blue, or I can make it error red or warning red. And when I click it, it just closes the dialog. When I click it, it saves a record. When I click it, it makes a copy of a whatever. It saves a record behind the scenes. All these actions can happen whenever you click any button, including the continue button. So there's, I mean, there are so many different potential use cases for these new forms. Here's just a few of them to spark your imagination. So complex data validation, we talked about that, right? Where if this field value is this, and this thing is blank, and this thing is whatever, pop up a message to the user referencing this field, that field, and that field, and build the complicated message and show your dialogue, right? It's really advanced logic for validating data input. You can auto-load user records. So when one of your employees goes to the forum, you get their Spider Impact ID, you go to a data set and pull up all of their records and say, here's all the hardware assigned to you. So instead of taking a user to a forum and they have to choose their name from a dropdown, you go out and you automatically load their employee ID, and you list, here's all the hardware currently assigned to you, and you can do various tasks with it. Or here's all the sales currently assigned to you, right? Based on these loading actions, you can load various records based on the actual person who is logging in, and they'll deliver customized appearances and customized behaviors based on who is there with information preloaded. You can prevent duplicate form submissions. So for example, if you want to take an employee survey, same kind of concept, but when someone first logs in, it goes off and looks, hey, has Bob Jones submitted, because it knows who Bob Jones is, has Bob Jones submitted a survey yet? If not, great. I log in and I see the whole survey all listed out. If I have already submitted a survey, it takes me to a page automatically that says, sorry, you can't fill this out. You've already filled out one before. Or maybe it loads my existing survey results and pre-fills it so that I can update my existing responses. There's all kinds of things you can do. And finally, you can do audit trails. So for example, I could have a data set called actions taken on personnel actions, right? And I've got a personnel data set. And so whenever I modify, okay, I'm going to modify James's home address, behind the scenes, I create a temporary variable over here in the audit data set, and I say, all right, Scott O'Reilly at this particular date modified James's home address, and then it saves that record to an audit log behind the scenes. So then I've got two data sets. I've got my employees data set, I've got my employee actions data set, and I can see all the different actions, but who made the changes to the employees, when they did the action, and what changes were made. Again, all this will happen behind the scenes based on these advanced actions like saving records. So I know that was a lot and that got really technical in the end, but what this means is these three new tentpole features allow us to completely do brand new types of things that were never before possible in Spider Impact. If this stuff's exciting for you, we cannot wait for you to try it.